A man is sitting across from the Secretary of Defense. The room is closed. The cameras are off. And the message is simple. Drop your 2 restrictions on how this AI is used. Or by 5 p.m. tomorrow, you lose every federal contract, every agency, every program. The man is Dario Amodei. He's the CEO of Anthropic, the company behind Claude, one of the most advanced AI systems operating inside the U.S. military. Not experimental, not theoretical, operational. The first AI system ever approved for classified military environments. The contract on the table is worth roughly $200 million. But what gets decided inside that room does not stay in that room. It reaches the system that scores your Medicare claim, the one that decides whether your surgery gets approved or denied. A 72-year-old veteran in Arizona opens a letter from his insurance provider. His knee replacement was denied. The letter says the decision was based on computer-based risk scoring. No doctor reviewed his file. No one called him. An algorithm looked at his age, his history, and his zip code and decided he was not worth the cost. Well, he does not know who made the decision. He does not know an AI made it for him. Well, the rules that made that denial possible, well, they trace back to rooms like the one Amodei is sitting in right now. And the 2 restrictions the Pentagon wants removed: no AI for mass domestic surveillance, no fully autonomous weapons where AI, not a human, makes the final targeting decision on the battlefield. Well, the Pentagon said it had no interest in those 2 use cases, but it refused to put that in writing. So Amodei did not blink. He said the company cannot agree and feel right about it. The threats, he said, do not change his position. So within days, the White House ordered every federal agency to phase out Anthropic technology. Another company stepped in. Well, here's the part no headline explains. When government says lawful and a company says safe, those words do not mean the same thing. And once AI is inside war infrastructure, definitions matter more than intentions. When definitions harden inside national security systems, they do not stay there. They travel. So this is not about war policy. The definitions being negotiated in that room will shape the rules inside the systems that score your Medicare claims, that decide on your Social Security appeals, that flag your tax returns. So that's where it's going. And that is why it matters to you right now. So let me unpack this. The Wall Street Journal reported what happened in that room. The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth delivered 2 demands directly. Let the Pentagon use Claude for all legal purposes, or face 2 consequences. So the Pentagon would use its authority to make them agree, and it would block Anthropic from doing any other work across the entire federal government. So here is what I need you to understand. Anthropic was not asking the Pentagon to stop doing anything. It was asking the Pentagon to commit its own stated intentions to contract language, and the Pentagon said no. That distinction matters. So what a government says it will not do is a promise. What a contract prevents it from doing is a hard limit. Those are 2 entirely different forms of protection. Promises change when administrations change, when a crisis hits, when operational pressure builds. Hard limits survive those moments, and that is why contracts exist. So Amodei held. Anthropic missed the deadline. So what happened next was fast. It was not subtle. The administration ordered every federal agency to immediately stop using Anthropic technology. A 6-month wind-down was established. Then the Pentagon labeled Anthropic a threat to national security. That designation has never been applied to an American AI company. It's normally reserved for firms connected to foreign adversaries, not for one of the most capable AI labs in the country. So the personal attacks followed. The Undersecretary of War called Amodei a liar, accused him of having a God complex and said he wanted to personally control the U.S. military. But here is what that noise was covering. Every single thing in the Pentagon currently wanted Anthropic to work on, Anthropic was willing to do. But the breakdown was not about today. It was about tomorrow. The Pentagon did not trust Anthropic would cooperate in future operations. Anthropic did not trust the Pentagon to self-limit in future conflicts. So that mutual distrust is a real fracture, and everything that follows sits on top of it. The ban, the political theater, the replacement deal, all of it. So let me explain why these definitions inside this contract matter more than the contract itself. Fully autonomous weapons. That phrase appeared in every deadline, but it's not a formal term in weapons policy. It does not describe how AI actually works inside the modern military. AI today does not sit at the end of a chain making a single decision to fire or not fire. It is layered in at every stage: target identification, risk scoring, intelligence filtering, decision support. A tool that assists a human and a system that replaces human judgment are not the same thing. See, the line between them is not clean. That gray area is not a failure of language. It is baked into how technology is built. So when a contract says no fully autonomous weapons, the question is, what exactly does that prohibit? Well, if AI scores the targets, filters the intelligence, and ranks the options, but a human clicks the final button, is that autonomous? Under most current definitions, it is not. But the human in that chain is operating inside a decision setup that AI already shaped. That is the gap. And it's not an accident. It is where the technology lives right now. So picture that same setup inside a Medicare approval system. AI scores the medical necessity. AI ranks the risk. AI filters the medical records. A human clicks approve or deny. But the decision was already shaped before the human ever saw your file. The structure is identical. The stakes just moved from a battlefield to your benefits. So imagine your approval gets denied. The letter says the decision was based on computer-based risk scoring. No doctor overruled you. An algorithm scored you before a human ever opened your file. So now consider the second red line: mass domestic surveillance. The Pentagon says it does not conduct mass surveillance under its legal definitions. That may hold up. But we've been here before. The Snowden revelations in 2013 showed exactly this pattern. Government agencies ran surveillance programs that were legal under their internal frameworks, reviewed by courts, approved by oversight committees. But when the public saw what those programs actually did, the gap was enormous. The official definition and the lived reality were not even close. AI makes that gap wider. Because AI-powered surveillance does not require the same infrastructure as old surveillance. It does not need wiretaps or physical monitoring. It runs on spotting patterns across millions of people. The line between national security pattern recognition and domestic population monitoring, well, it depends entirely on how you define the boundaries that the Pentagon refused to commit to writing. So if you're over 60, this is not a future problem. This is already inside your benefit system right now. So what happened after Anthropic was pushed out? Well, OpenAI stepped in within hours. The CEO, Sam Altman, announced a deal with the Pentagon. He stated the Pentagon agreed not to use OpenAI technology for mass surveillance or fully autonomous weapons. The Pentagon told a different story. It claimed it secured exactly what it originally demanded, the anti-lawful use standard it wanted from Anthropic. Both of those statements cannot fully be true, and that is not a footnote. It's the entire story. So OpenAI believes it held the same red lines Anthropic held. The Pentagon believes it got unrestricted access. Military legal experts spent the weekend picking apart the details. And what they found was this: The phrases that sound like protections may not hold up inside the legal framework built for wiggle room. The guardrails are not as solid as anyone is claiming publicly. So meanwhile, Anthropic said communication ended before the deadline even resolved. And the public conversation focused on politics. The contract details were never part of it. No mention of the two red lines, the contract language, the autonomous weapon questions, or the surveillance definition. So now here is where I need to connect this to something that most people are not seeing. While this is played out publicly, the Senate Armed Services Committee quietly wrote to both sides, urging them to drop the deadline and involve Congress. Stephen Feldstein at the Carnegie Endowment made the argument that defines this moment. The core issue is not who controls AI. It's whether anyone is actually watching the people who control the weapon. His word for it was a very powerful and unknowable weapon. His point was specific. No single institution was designed to write those rules alone, not the military, not a private AI company, and that job has not been done yet. So there's no modern watchdog system for AI inside military systems. The technology is running ahead of every institution designed to govern it. And that is where this becomes personal. So if you're watching this, you have lived through these cycles before. The Cold War standoffs, post-9/11 surveillance expansion, the Snowden revelations. You've seen what happens when technology outpaces the institutions designed to contain it. You've seen emergencies authorities quietly becoming permanent structures. Well, this is that pattern again. AI is not chatbots and image generators. It's the infrastructure. It sits inside classified systems, intelligence systems, and war planning systems. But it also sits inside something closer to you daily. The same AI industry negotiating military contracts is building the system that governs Medicare fraud detection and risk scoring, Social Security disability decisions making tools, IRS systems that decide who gets flagged, insurance pricing systems, healthcare approval systems. These are not made-up ideas. They're already underway. Guardrails are vague at the military level. The stakes there are literal life and death. They will not sharpen when they reach your benefit system. If any lawful use becomes the rule of war, it does not stop there. It becomes the template for how AI operates everywhere. Retirement security depends on institutional stability, stable rules, predictable enforcement, definitions that mean the same thing to the system making the decision and to the person standing in front of it. So when definitions shift quietly at the national security level, they set the playbook for how AI scores your claims, how it labels your risk, and how it defines fraud in your benefits. So this is not about fear. It's about recognizing a pattern you've seen before and knowing exactly where it leads when no one intervenes early enough. So this dispute is not about one company in the Pentagon. It's about a turning point. Artificial intelligence is the backbone of how things run now. And when infrastructure powerful enough to shape military decisions operates on flexible definitions, that set of rules does not stay inside a Pentagon. It becomes a template for markets, for healthcare, for the systems that determine whether your retirement stays stable or gets quietly changed by an algorithm no one voted on. The most important question right now is not who won this contract. It's who writes the rules and who will govern the next 30 years. So right now, those rules have not been written. The agencies using the technology are deciding what they mean, and the companies building the technology are shaping them behind closed doors. So right now, the rules that govern your Medicare claim are being shaped in rooms you were never invited to. Not by one institution, not by one party, by a process that has not caught up to the technology. Remember the man in that room, Amodei sat across from the Secretary of Defense? $200 million on the table. The full weight of the federal government pointed in his company, and he held the line, not because he had the power, but because the contract language mattered more than the contract value. Now think about the contract language you never see. The one inside your Medicare Advantage plan that determines how an approval algorithm scores your claim. The one inside the Social Security decision-making system that defines how risk gets labeled. The one inside the IRS system that decides what triggers a flag on your return. Those definitions were not written in a hearing you could watch. They were written in rooms like the one Amodei sat in. And they were written by people who were not thinking about you and I. So you will not get a letter the day those definitions change. No one will announce it. The algorithm will just score your claim a little differently, label your risk a little higher. And the definition that made that possible was negotiated in a room you and I were never in. If definitions in war can change quietly, what makes you think they will not change in your benefit system? You've seen this before. Our generation is the last one that has. That does not make you powerless. It makes you the only people in the room who recognize a pattern before it finishes. This is Hanh Brown. Thanks for tuning in, The Hanh Brown Show. See you in the next one.